In this lesson, we'll draw stones in about 10 different ways. These are the oval, smooth types of stones you see lying on a beach or grassy fields. We'll reference this stone I picked up from the beach. The shape is simple to draw, so let's focus on the tricky part, its surface. For this, we'll consult the light and shade guidelines from Arthur Guptill's book. What's important to note is the shape doesn't go from light to dark directly. There's a reflective area from the bounce light near the edge of the stone. Thinking of the light source as a little tent or a teepee helps me better visualize this concept. This tent effect creates bands of values across the surface of the stone. It even shows you where to put the cast shadow. The simplest way to shade this stone is to use line quality, line weight. The area that gets the most light has no edge, it's a broken outline. The part of the stone in shadow has a thicker outline. The stronger the light source, the less details we see. By the way, I'm using a brush pen marker, which has a softer tip. Alternately, you could use a fine liner pen to go over the line, or if you're skilled with a brush or quill, a tool to vary the line weight in a single stroke, use that. For rendering, we'll hatch only the darkest value on the stone, plus the cast shadow. Then add a few marks to indicate a bit of texture on the stone's surface. That stone was under bright light, but what if your scene has varied light? We'd see more details, more tone variety, like in this value scale that goes from white to solid black. The marks get closer together, the denser the shadows get. Using parallel lines, or here's the darker tone using a cross-hatching pattern. The hatching pattern can vary, but the gradation principle stays the same. If we applied that exact chart to our stone, the values would look something like this. But if we render the stone exactly like the chart, the values are correct, but the rendering is not very convincing. So let's fix that. We've got the right values. Now let's work on a rendering technique. We outline the contour thin to thick as before. Assuming the light is further away, our cast shadow is now smaller with denser values. Rendering in the same hatching direction as before, using diagonal curved hatches, but longer to cover more of the stone because less light is coming through. The strokes are spaced to match the number 2 value from the chart. To achieve the number 3 value, we add shorter hatches in between. We apply the number 4 value with crosshatches to shade the darker band that goes across. From here, it's easy to build the midtones for smoother gradations. And we finish off with the number 5 value, layering subtle crosshatch. Then continue to refine the textures and done. We use the same value chart, but this natural rendering technique makes our stone look more realistic. A nice variation on the vertical hatching from before is to render the lines not perfectly uniform. Some hatches are long, some short, and then we layer strokes in between to deepen the tone, like we did in the previous exercise. Continuing with the vertical hatching, instead of adding lines in between, we increase the weight of the lines where the value is darker. We give it an engraving effect by thickening the strokes, for the transition areas from light to dark. Let's see what our stone looks like with curved horizontal strokes. But instead of abrupt changes in tones, we transition by varying the spacing between the lines. Now that we've practiced basic principles for shading a smooth, roundish object, let's experiment with rendering styles. In this one, we'll contour the form and bring the lines closer together in the areas with less light. A variation on that with a sci-fi vibe. Now with short dashes that follow the form and transition into a pattern. Pulls you right on through the door. So hold on to all that feeds your soul. I know a place where the sun shines every day. So come with me, I'll take you there. I'll take you there. Same principle we used before, adding strokes in between to darken the tone. How about a dense cross-hatching pattern? The possibilities are limitless. We could easily do a dozen more of these. Your ink drawings will turn out well when mindful of the values and how the light interacts with the surface of the object, in this case, a beach stone. These were 9 different rendering styles for a single stone. But what if your scene has piles of stones? I've gone ahead and drawn a sample pile of stones from my reference. As you can see, the shading gets more complex. The taller stones, they block the light and cast shadows on the stones below. Looking back at our values chart, white means direct light, all the light. 2 means less light. 3 is in the shade. 4 is now a cast shadow. And 5 is no light, total darkness. We can figure this out with our tent to plan the shaded areas and where the bigger stones block the light. In pencil, I sketched the values in, then rendered the pile of stones in my preferred inking styles from the previous exercises. Actually, I'm combining some of the techniques as practice. And that completes our exercises, rendering stones in 10 different shading techniques. We looked at how light affects smooth stones and groups of stones, and also how to plan the values while applying various styles. In a future lesson, we'll do the same thing with irregular shaped rocks and groups of rocks, so be sure to turn on your notifications if you'd like to join that one. I really appreciate your support. The kind comments on my videos, it means a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.